welcome back to paper mache with plaster strips. Today we're going to actually add the plaster strips to our armature. So you'll find that the plaster strips come in big long strips, and all this is gauze covered in plaster. This is basically the same material that they use to make casts if you break a bone. So you don't want to use strips in their big long form, especially for a small sculpture like this. So what you should do to start is just have a pile of cut strips first. So cut a whole bunch of strips that are, much smaller in size, and then I have a bunch of like little tiny ones too that I can have. It's easier to cut them first than to try to cut them as you go, because your hands are going to get wet, and when your hands get wet and they touch the plaster strips, you activate the plaster. All right. So I have my strips, I have some smaller pieces, I have my armature, and I also have a bucket full of water. Make sure you're using the buckets at your table. They are for the plaster strips. All right, so when you're ready, all you want to do is take the strip and you want to dip it into the water. Okay. Once you dip it into the water, you're going to feel that it gets soft, and you want to take it and with your fingers kind of rub. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and lay it onto your armature. Okay. And what you want to do is kind of wrap it around, and you want to really focus on smoothing. And you can dip your fingers in a little bit of water to get that smooth. We're trying to create a sculpture that doesn't have a lot of edges or sharp corners. You want everything to be smoothed in. Alright, when you're doing this process, you need to make sure that you lay a decent amount of newspaper under you, because it does get very messy and wet. When you're laying on the plaster strips, it doesn't matter what direction you go. You can wrap around, you can go more horizontally or vertically. You just don't want big giant strips. That's why we cut them at the beginning. And when you do this process, you want to make sure that you're constantly dipping your hands in the water. That way you smooth out any of those little pockets of plaster, and the whole sculpture will be much more smooth. You're also going to want to make sure that you do at least 2 coats of the plaster strips. One coat just won't be sufficient enough to give you that hard structure. So once you do 1 coat and have it completely covered, another coat of plaster strips is something you're going to want to do. And the plaster dries relatively quickly, and you don't have to wait for it to be completely dry to add your second coat. Now my sculpture is pretty much done, and I just need to put it on the drying rack at your table. Do not let it sit on the newspaper or it will stick when you come back. So we're all finished, and the next step will be painting.